Welcome to the show today. My guest today needs no introduction. She has been on Good Morning America probably several times. She's been on Oprah. She's been on TED Talks. You've spoken at every major event. You've been on every cover of every magazine, not to embarrass you. Well, so thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
You know what? This is interesting. Someone made a comment on your Instagram. You made a post recently. And I was, for some reason, reading through the comments, and someone made this comment. I don't know if you saw it, but I was like, that person defined it perfectly. If you're at all close to my age or anywhere near, give or take like 10 years, you know where you were when 9/11 happened, and you know where you were when Elizabeth Smart was found. So I was like, yes, those are the two things. I remember exactly where I was when Elizabeth Smart was found. I told you this when we were out to breakfast. When you were found, we were sitting there watching American Idol, and then the commercial came on, and it was like, breaking news, Elizabeth Smart has been found, and all of us just broke down into tears, which is probably what you've been told by so many people. Broke down into tears. I went into my bedroom and got on my knees, said this prayer, just bawling, saying, thank you so much for finding her. I couldn't believe it. So for anyone who's maybe a little bit younger, who's too young to know what was going on, do you mind telling us what happened?
Sure. So born and raised in Salt Lake City. I was born into a wonderful family. Growing up, I lived in a nice neighborhood. I grew up in a beautiful home. Like up in Salt Lake proper, like up on the mountain, underneath the U on the mountain.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Very nice area.
Like nobody would ever think, crime would be a big issue there. And if it was, it'd be like white collar crime kind of thing.
Financial stuff.
Yeah, it wouldn't be like kidnapping or rape or sexual violence or like it wouldn't be anything that you'd think, oh, like major felony. And I mean, we knew like our neighbors, we knew our street. I mean, my best friend lived across the street from us. I mean, we grew up playing night games every night during the summer together. And, my mom would we had this big bell on our front porch. And when she'd ring the bell, that meant it was time to come home and have dinner. And that's kind of how the first part of my childhood really was. And so, we were given all the same basic safety information as probably most other children. Don't cross the street without looking both ways. Stop, drop, and roll. Don't talk to strangers. Listen to your parents. Don't walk alone by yourself at night. Just like,
and you would never had a reason to be walking alone by yourself.
Yeah, and I wasn't even to this day, and honestly, I'm not the rebellious type of person. Yeah. I'm like, oh, the kids are in bed. It's time to go to bed.
Yeah.
Oh, it's dark outside. It's time to go to bed.
Yeah.
Especially
a 14-year-old.
No, I've never been like a wild child. I guess I can only speak for myself, but looking back on my life, if I had to pinpoint like the most awkward years of my life, it would be junior high.
Same for everyone. Yeah.
I remember just being so excited, thought of going to high school, because in my mind, I was like, oh, once I make it to high school, like all of this awkwardness will just like evaporate. It'll just disappear. Everything will be fine.
Which is funny that you felt that way, because I look at those pictures and they're so beautiful, even as a 14-year-old.
The locker room was not a pretty place.
Never is.
No. But I just remember being very excited about the future, excited for summer, like excited to have a break from school and sleeping in and no homework.
Yes.
And late summer nights. And just a lot to look forward to. And I remember, the night before my junior high graduation, going to bed, and it was a good day. There was nothing bad about that day. There were no premonitions or feelings of foreboding or anything. It was a good day.
Yeah. And so this would have been in May then, right?
It was June.
June, okay.
Beginning of June, and June 4th.
Yeah, I bet you know that day well.
I went to bed like I would any other day. I shared a room with my younger sister and we shared a bed. And I remember falling asleep next to my younger sister. And then the next thing I remember was hearing a man's voice saying, I have a knife at your neck. Don't make a sound. Get up and come with me. And of course, the first time I heard that, I couldn't believe that that was real because,
That was a dream, maybe.
like, why would that be happening to me? Like, why would that be happening in my neighborhood? Things like that didn't happen, or so I thought.
Yeah.
And so I just laid there because it couldn't be real. How could it possibly be real? I was at home. I was in like my safe place. Like
Yeah.
I was in my bed, the safest of all safe places, the places that, you go when you feel sick or you feel hurt or
You're
you need a
safe.
good cry or something. And yet this was happening. So I didn't respond immediately. The voice repeated the same words, but this time I could feel like his hand on my arm trying to pull me out of bed. I remember actually feeling something lying cold and sharp, lying across my neck. And I remember finally opening my eyes, and sure enough, there's this dark figure standing over me. And in that moment, like, it wasn't a dream.
Did you realize that like there's actually a man here now? And like,
Yeah.
what are you feeling right then?
I mean, it was just shock. Like, how could it be anything else? It was just pure adrenaline in that moment. I mean, I went from like being completely asleep, like at a dead zero, all of a sudden up to like 100.
And was your sister, did she wake up with the man there too?
So at the time, I thought she was still asleep because she didn't move. Like I could tell she was breathing, but she wasn't moving. She didn't say anything. Like I couldn't see anything of her. But after I was rescued and in the intervening 20 years,
Yeah.
she and I have chatted about it and, come to find out she did actually wake up and she was actually watching everything that happened. And she has told me how, she laid in bed, she didn't move because she was waiting, like, to hear what happened, like to hear when he left before she went in to tell my parents because we had alarms on all of our doors. And, whenever you opened a door, a beeping sound would go off and she waited and waited and waited. The beeping sound never went off.
How old was she at this time?
She was 8.
She's 8.
Yeah, she was, oh no, my life. She was 9.
Okay.
She was 9.
Yeah.
So little. She was a little girl.
Well, yeah.
And I mean, my oldest is 8 right now. And I think,
Gosh, I bet you thought about
like,
that.
what what would my little Chloe do? Like, and then to have like the pressure of, well, what happened? Well, what did you see? Well, remember something more. Like, you're the only one that saw anything. You must remember something else. Like, I mean, I can't imagine like having that kind of like pressure on.
Probably over and over from investigators and
I mean, like, I know my parents were extremely, extremely protective of her. She was like interrogated by the police, and I mean, she just kept giving them the same information. They wanted to hypnotize her. They tried to hypnotize her, thinking that they'd be able to get something more out of her, but she only could ever give what she saw. Like, there wasn't anything else to like. She gave everything she had.
And could she see him? Or was it too dark?
I mean, it was dark. There was there was a big lamp post. I mean, my home was set up like on the mounted side, and like our bedroom was at the very top of our house, like one of the highest points of our house. It wasn't on the ground floor or anything. And the lamp post, I mean, it was in front of our house, but I mean, our house wasn't like right up on the curb. Like, I mean, it was set back.
Yeah.
A ways from the street. So I mean, there was light, but it's not like you could just sit and read a book in that kind of light. It was still very like dark.
Yeah.
So I mean, she would have been able to see like his outline, but she wouldn't really be able to see much more. And I mean, she said she thought he had a gun, but he had a knife. I mean, she could tell he had something. Plus, I mean, once again, like, she's 9 years old.
Yeah, she's a baby.
Like when I asked my daughter, like, you know, like what ski runs, because we've been big into skiing this winter, like what ski runs did you do today? Or she'll be like, I did 10 black diamonds. And I'm like, did you? She's like,
Really?
yes. I was like, what ones did you do? She's like, I did this one and this one. I did all of them. I'm like, really? You did all of them?
So yeah, they're babies. They don't necessarily have the
Like,
most accurate information. Yeah.
I mean, I think my sister was like incredibly like accurate for what she could see. Like she understood like this is a big deal. And she talked about how she laid in bed waiting to hear the alarm go off so she would know if it was safe to get out of
to go
bed.
tell your parents. Yeah.
She said she never heard the alarm go off because it didn't.
Oh yeah. So tell everyone how he got in the house and out.
So he had my mom is a wonderful cook to begin with. So let me just say that.
I believe you.
But, you know, my grandpa had actually just like passed away. The funeral had just been like a few days before. Like it was like he was never sick a day in his life. And then it was like the 2002 Winter Olympics were in Salt Lake. It was like as soon as that started, he just like, he wasn't like getting up so much anymore. He had always been like really active.
And this is your mom's dad.
This is my mom's dad.
Okay.
They've like gone into the hospital. Turns out he had like this big brain tumor with like fingers going into his brain. So I mean it's her dad.
That's hard on
Like,
him. Yeah.
of course she would spend a lot of time like being there. And then I mean it was such a rapid like it was such a rapid decline. Like they did surgery on him. And honestly, like I don't feel like I ever saw him the same
Yeah.
prior to surgery. But I mean, I didn't have the relationship that like my mom does.
Yeah.
I mean, he was definitely like
Right.
always like I saw him every week of my life.
Yeah.
Up until
Wow. Yeah.
so like it was like my mom, like there'd been a lot of things going on. It was the end of the school year and there's 6 of us. So it was like
Yeah.
the rush of
Oh, I understand that.
projects and,
That's
like, do we meet all the deadlines? Do we get everything done we need to do? You know, like there's a lot going on.
Side note, what's the age range between the oldest and youngest?
So my older brother is 18 months older than me.
Okay.
And then my youngest brother's 11 years younger than me. So we are all like within 13 years of each other.
Okay, so not much different than my 6 kids.
Yeah.
Because I've got 6 ages 10 and under. So, okay, same thing. Go on.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're all like
Close.
busy,
Very busy.
very
Yeah.
busy. And my mom would like put potatoes on the stove to boil that night. And, you know, as things got busy and she's trying to track us all down, ringing the bell for us to come home for dinner.
So cute.
The potatoes burned, which is not like her. And so we like behind our house there's I mean, we're up on a mountainside, but there are also like some ravines and like you could have a really nice breeze coming down the mountains.
Bless the kids.
In the evening. And so she'd opened up the windows to kind of air out the burnt potato smell. And I actually remember going around that evening with my dad, like locking doors and like closing windows. And like there was still a tang in the air.
Yeah.
And so that window wasn't locked. I mean, it was mostly closed, but just a mere crack just to kind of like continue to air out the kitchen.
Oh.
Like it wasn't just like wide open. It was like 95% shut. It was like essentially the latch wasn't like locked into place. And it was a skinny window. And it wasn't just like 2 feet off the ground or 5 feet off the ground. It was like probably 6 feet off the ground. I mean, it was still like kind of high up in the air.
How did he do that then?
And it was skinny, you know, it was probably only 8 inches wide, maybe. Like it wasn't a big window. And he had found this window. He'd taken one of the patio chairs, like pushed it up under the window, climbed up on the chair, forced the window open, cut through the screen, and come in through our kitchen. That's how he got in. And then when he took me out, like the magnet that sits in the frame of the door, that sets off the alarm, I guess had fallen out, and just none of us.
It's like, how did these?
None of us knew. None of us knew that. Yeah, none of us had a clue that had happened. And so when my sister was waiting to hear the alarm go off, that's why it didn't go off. And I'm like, to this day, I'm honestly not entirely sure how long she laid and waited in bed. But she talks how she waited there for what felt like a long time because she just didn't know if he was still in the house.
She's so terrified.
Like she didn't know like if he was killing me, if he killed other people in the house. I mean, like when you're scared, you think of how your imagination goes wild, even if you haven't even seen anything. And then you take into account like she saw her older sister taken from the same bed right next to her. And
She's a
so,
baby.
and her imagination goes wild. But she talked about how she had like this ratty old baby blanket. She like wrapped it around her. I went into my parents' room. Like my dad was in a heavy sleep, so she walked around to my mom's side and she was just like, Mom, Elizabeth's gone. And I was like, oh, my Catherine, like, it's fine. Like, I'm sure she just went and slept in a different room. Like, you're like kicking or you're like hogging the covers or the bed or something. Like, I'm sure she just moved to a different room because that would not necessarily be out of character.
Right,
For me.
right.
So my dad at this point, of course, wakes up and he's like, go find her. Like, it's fine. They're like checking my brother's rooms. They're going down. My sister, she's just there. She's like, Mom, you're not going to find her. A man came in and took her. And
Oh,
the parents are like, that can't be right. Like, it just has to be a bad dream.
so they didn't. What did they think at first? Were they like, oh no, 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 like,
Well, I mean, like, at first, because it was supposed to be like a safe neighborhood, things like this didn't happen. So, yeah, my parents at first were just like, no, that can't be right. Like, she's here. She just probably had a bad dream and she's probably just in another bedroom. Um, And so, they're checking. And of course, as they're checking these rooms and they're not finding me, like their panic is like rising higher and higher. And my sister's like, you're not going to find her. A man came and took her. Like, I mean, it's obviously like feeding into their fear and their anxiety that could that be true? Like, is what she's saying true? Or is this just a bad dream and Elizabeth's just in a different part of the house? But they came down the stairs. My dad went one way, my mom ran the other way, like slammed the lights on, and her eyes went immediately above the kitchen sink and she saw the window forced open and the screen cut. And at that point she knew.
oh,
She just screamed out, Ed, call the police. Elizabeth's gone. She's been taken. Yeah.
oh my gosh. I'm sure you've asked your parents like what. I mean, it sounds like a stupid question. It's like, what are they feeling right then? Well, obviously they're feeling terrible and scared and everything, but like, I just can't even imagine the panic at that point. Like, what was their first reaction? Was it to pray? Was it to freak out? What did they do?
I mean, like when my mom saw the screen cut, I mean, she just yelled like, Ed, call the police. I mean, like, I mean, my dad called the police immediately, and then it was like calling the neighbors, like, check your kids. Elizabeth's gone. Like, like make sure your daughters are still there. Like, it was like panic and immediate action, and like making sure all my brothers were still there, and like, I mean, it was just, I mean, I think it was just pure panic.
How old was the youngest at the time?
My youngest brother was 3.
So he was just a baby. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. So they're still having to take care of little kids and like, oh my goodness. So tell me, once you get out of the house and it was through the front door because the magnet.
So it was through like the back kitchen door because the back,
Okay.
the back of the house faced the mountains. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So tell me what happens. Is he like grabbing you by the arm? Is he?
Yes. So he physically was holding on to me. He's holding on to me with one hand. The other hand still had like his knife holding on to me. And yeah, I mean, he just directed me to run like towards the mountains behind my home.
Oh my gosh. So when you're going up the mountains, what are you thinking at this time? Like, are you well aware that this is not a
I
dream?
mean, like, it felt so surreal. Like, it just felt, um, like, I remember my brain, like, trying to make sense of it. So in, like, my church youth group, like in the young women's groups, the girls like 12 to 18 kind of group, like I had heard like different leaders, female leaders, they'd be like, oh yeah, like we're gonna kidnap so and so for their birthday and take them to breakfast or surprise them. Or so like ironically my mind was like,
This is a joke.
this has to be a joke, like this can't be real, even though I knew I didn't know this man. This was a scary man. He had a knife. And I knew my like church leaders. I knew my young women's leaders, like kindest, most lovely women you could ever hope to meet, you know? Um, but like for a split second, I was like, maybe this is just an elaborate joke.
Like a sick joke.
Like, I mean, but that's, I'm like, I think I've always been this way that like when something bad happens, like my mind, whether it's like a survival instinct or like a protection instinct, that my mind just like kicks into place, but it's almost like to shield me from whatever reality is, my brain wants to take me to like, this isn't that bad. It's going to be okay. Like, don't panic. There's going to be like an explanation behind this, or there's a reason behind this. And I think that's what like my little 14-year-old brain was trying to do, being like, this could just be a joke, Elizabeth. Don't panic.
What a mature way to think.
That's of course like there's one more street behind my home before like the neighborhood ends, and it's just mountains after that. And we got up to this street, and when we got up to this street, and he had me cross it, and we're heading up into the mountains, that's kind of when my brain was like, no, this isn't a joke.
Like when you realized this is not a joke, what were you thinking is happening next to you?
I mean, it just like I couldn't understand why. Why would someone kidnap me? I mean, like, what draw would I hold for anyone? I was a 14-year-old girl. Like, why would anyone kidnap me? I mean, there were many more families in our neighborhood that were much, 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 much more affluent than we were. Um, like, why would I be targeted? You know, like I just couldn't understand it. Why would anyone kidnap me? And as far as I knew, like we weren't an offensive family. Like,
Yeah.
we didn't have enemies. I didn't have enemies. Like, I didn't think anyone hated us. I mean, we just were, like
Typical.
another family. We just kind of like blended into like blended in, you know? Like there just wasn't, I just couldn't understand why would anyone.
So when your book first came out, this was probably about 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, yeah.
I don't remember verbatim, but when you guys were crossing that street after he takes you out of the house, he said something that's such a perversion of what religion and God is. It was something along the lines of, if God wants me to do this, then this police car will pass by or something like
Yeah,
that. Will you
yeah.
tell me about that?
Yeah, so it was once again like we'd gone up to the top of my backyard through like this fake lot behind my home, and there's, as I mentioned, there's this one street after you kind of leave the neighborhood, and it's just mountains. And he had pulled me down behind some bushes, which of course my mind starts going to, this is like the meeting place for the getaway car, because why would anyone just run you up into the mountains? Like, didn't make sense to me. And as he's holding me down behind some bushes, sure enough, there's some headlights coming towards us. And then I hear him say, like, if this be God's will, the car will pass. And as this car gets closer and closer, it passes. And it's a police car, of all cars to pass by. But sure enough, it passes. And I remember just in my mind, when I heard him say that, I remember just thinking, what just happened?
Um, did you feel feelings of desperation if you saw a police car? Like, oh my gosh, you're right
I
there.
mean, like, as a kid, like, I didn't have interaction with police officers.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I didn't know any personally. They were just like figures of authority. And I mean, like, as I mentioned, I was a pretty submissive child. Like, I wasn't wild, rebellious. And so, like, honestly, figures of authority like intimidated
Yeah.
me, like made me a little bit scared. And police, they just seemed like this awesome, like all powerful kind of
Like I'm in trouble
law
even if I didn't do something
enforcement.
wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And so I just remember seeing that police car thinking, oh my goodness, they already know. Like they know everything. They're out here already. Like it's gonna be okay. Um, but I mean, of course, they didn't know at that point yet, and
Yeah.
he didn't know to look for me. And like as soon as he was around the bend from us, like there was my captor, like pulling me off the ground and having me run up into the mountains again.
Gosh. So how long did you walk before you got to this campsite that he had made?
I like time had a really, I don't know, like funny way of passing. I mean, on one hand, it felt like we were going forever, but on the other hand, like it felt like no time at all. Um, After I was rescued, I mean, I have hiked back to where I was held like a few times, not a lot, but a few times I've gone back there. And I mean, it's like three and a half, like between 3 and 3.5 miles back up into the mountains behind
That's
my
a lot.
home.
Well, I'm out of shape, but that feels like a lot to be
I mean,
doing.
like on one hand, yeah, like it is a lot,
You
but
get adrenaline probably too.
on the other hand, like it's like not that much. I mean, I ran 3.5 miles on the treadmill this morning. Like,
It's amazing.
no,
Not a riot.
it's my way to fight the gloom.
Oh, yes. Okay. I understand that.
I'm very over this gray weather.
Just hang in there a little bit longer. Okay. So if you go 3.5 miles, that's probably, well, were you walking fast?
I mean, like sometimes it felt like we were going fast, but we weren't following a trail.
Yeah.
Like the brush was really thick and overgrown. I remember getting down on my hands and knees at one point and just like crawling through it.
Yeah.
So I feel like whenever you're like headed up into the mountains, whether you're on like a hiking trail or you're bushwhacking your way through, like it's really hard to like judge distance and like
Totally.
your effort, like your exertion effort might feel like it's like really high, like you're exerting a lot of energy, but maybe you're not moving very fast. But so
So it could have been give or take an hour or something.
I mean, like it was more than an hour. I mean, we were out for I like if I really had to guess how long it took us, I mean, I'd guess like probably 3.5 hours.
Okay. Wow, 3.5 hours.
From
So was
the
it
time
getting,
it took me out of my house to the time we got to the sitting campsite, because there'd be some points along the way that he'd just be like, okay, we're just going to stop for a little bit and wait for the sun to rise. But then we wouldn't be stopped that long, and he'd be like, we need to keep going.
so he's talking to you during this whole thing?
Not a lot. Not
Okay.
a lot. I mean, that was like more him talking to himself.
Okay.
And I just was listening.
Did you ask? I feel like in the book it said something about you asking, like, what are you going to do with me?
I did ask him a few times, like, why are you taking me? What are you going to do with me? I mean, like at one point he said, I'm taking you as my hostage. And I was like, my parents will pay anything to get me back. Like if they don't have the money, like they'll find it, they'll get it. Like they'll do anything to get me back. But he wasn't giving me a lot. Like at one point I asked him, if you're just going to rape and kill me, like, please do it here. Because it was important to me that like my parents knew what had happened. I wanted them to know like this wasn't my choice, that I hadn't run away, that I just wanted them to know what had happened to me. And he just kind of looked at me and was like, I'm not gonna rape and kill you yet.
He kept saying yet.
Yeah, he said yet. I was just like, well, what then? Like, what next? Like I remember asking him at one point, like, don't you realize what you're doing? Like, if you get caught, you'll spend the rest of your life in jail. But if you let me go, it'll be like this never happened. You don't even have to walk me home. I can find you on the way back. Just let me go. And man, I remember, and it's like, I remember him very vividly, just looking back and going, I know exactly what I'm doing. I know what the consequences. Wow, I know what the consequences are.
Was he
not
annoyed that you were
really.
asking those questions?
Not really. No, he didn't seem annoyed. He just would be like really vague. Like he answered those two questions like verbatim, like what I just said to you. But most of the other questions, he'd just be like, "You'll find out later." Like all will be revealed in due time. Like that kind of answer. Like he didn't really say much more than that. And in my mind, I was just like, "Can I escape? Is there a place to escape? Like please, like Heavenly Father, please let me escape. Let me escape. Like, did I miss a chance? Was that a chance? Did I just miss it? Like." Looking back now, I'm like, no, I didn't miss a chance. There wasn't a chance to escape.
You did absolutely nothing wrong.
Like, but like as like a kid in your mind, and like having been raised listening to stories about like you know Moses parting the Red Sea, or Noah in the Ark, or Daniel in the lion's den, or any of those stories, like God can do anything. So maybe that was my chance and I missed it. But no, there wasn't a chance that night.
Devastating feelings. She's this little innocent girl. Oh, my heart breaks just hearing this. When you so when you get to the campsite, is it now morning time or
The sun, yeah, the sun was light. It was very light.
so you could see what he looked like
Yeah.
and explain that? I mean, because I've only seen the pictures and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine as a child seeing that face.
No, he looks like Rasputin.
Yeah, he looks like the very definition of evil.
Yeah.
Well, he is. But I just can't imagine this poor sweet girl face that.
I mean, it was terrifying. And I mean, he was terrifying. Like, he was, I mean, even like I can think back during my captivity, and like I remember the thoughts in my mind of looking at him and being like, this is my, like, I'm going to have to look at him for the rest of my life. Like, I don't get to fall in love. Like, I don't get to have boyfriends. I don't get to know what it's like to like have a crush on someone or like be attracted to someone. Like, this is gonna be my life. Like, and kind of just like the disgust and horror that I felt thinking that. Like, I remember those thoughts.
So at what point, when you get there, now it's starting to be light outside, what happens next? And at what point do you know, like, oh, I'm not going back home?
Well, really, as soon as we got to the campsite, this woman walks out of the tent. She brings me inside. She sits me down on this, turn the bucket in the tent. She brought in this like little blue basin full of water. She starts to try to sponge bathe me.
How does a woman?
I know. Well, for the first, like, before she actually touched me, like, her initial approach to me, which, was only a couple feet, like, maybe as far away as we are sitting now, like, there's a part of me that's like, oh, it's gonna be okay. There's a woman here. Like, nothing that bad can happen. Like, it's gonna be okay. Like, there's another woman, like, there's a woman here. It's not just him and I. And, I was not didn't follow true crime.
Yeah.
Like,
14.
I didn't follow the news. And so like any thought of like a story of kidnapping didn't involve a woman in my mind. Yeah. It was always like a man kidnapping a woman or a child. And like I just couldn't like reconcile that there could be a woman there and she could let something bad happen to me. Those were like
I still trying to reconcile that.
My initial thoughts. But she, she brought me inside his tent. She tried to bathe me. I remember like begging her to leave me alone. She did. She handed me like this rope, told me to put it on. I did. Took my pajamas and got up and walked out of the tent. And then the man came back in. He had changed out of his, like, the dark sweat clothes he had on to kidnap me. And into like a robe, like a long sort of tunic like robe, just like the one the woman had on, like the one I've been forced to put on. And that was really, it was like at this moment that I realized he wasn't taking me home, because that's when he told me that I was going to now be his wife. And that's when I was like, he's not taking me for hostage. Like, that was a lie. Like he's not bringing me back to my family.
What, I mean, again, ridiculous question, but what feelings do you have at that point? Is it complete desperation, or what are you feeling like?
Yeah. I mean, desperation, shock, horror. Like, in my mind, I was like, I'm 14. I'm 14. Why are you kidnapping me? You can't marry a 14-year-old. I mean, I even said this to him. Like, I was like, you can't, like, you don't have the authority, number one, to like marry me. I'm 14. I'm a kid. Like, I haven't even hit puberty yet. Like, I haven't even had a period yet. Like, you can't do this to me. I never said yes. Like, legally, you can't do this. Like, I'm not 18. You can't do this.
So you knew at 14, like you knew what marriage meant, what he was insinuating when he said you're my wife.
Well, I knew I didn't like I had a very sheltered
Yeah.
childhood. So by the time I was 14, like I knew what sex was, but in my mind it was something that you only did when you were trying to have a baby.
Oh,
Like it wasn't like a regular part of marriage.
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a very, very sheltered upbringing.
Man. Okay, so tell us what happens next if you're comfortable, whatever you're comfortable sharing.
I mean, I talk about it all the time,
Yeah.
but I mean, like at that point, it just didn't matter what I said. The end result was the same, which was him raping me. And I remember just being, I mean, just in so much pain. I mean, physically, I was in a lot of pain. Like I remember like seeing blood down my thighs and stuff. But like, and emotionally, like I was in a lot of pain. But I mean, also like spiritually, I was in a lot of pain because, I went to church every single Sunday of my life. I sat through so many lessons on like chastity and virtue and purity. And up until that point, like I just sit there and be like, why are we having this lesson again? Like,
Having interest a boy.
like, I haven't even held a boy's hand.
Yeah.
Like, I've barely even said hi to a boy. Like, why are we talking about this? But like all these words that basically meant the same thing, which was don't have sex until marriage, make sure you're a virgin before marriage, make sure you're pure, make sure you keep yourself clean. Like if you don't, like you won't be wanted, like you won't be as good.
Why you won't be wanted.
I mean, in more
Or at least that's what you like
Yeah.
took from it.
Yeah.
It's so awful.
like there was so much emphasis put on remaining like sexually pure that and I mean I'm not criticizing anyone's beliefs or the decisions that they make. Like I think they're personal decisions, and if you choose to have sex before marriage, I don't think that makes you a bad person. I mean, that's a personal decision for you to make. But the way that I was raised, like it was devastating because not only had so much emphasis been put on this, well, what I'd say purity culture, but no one had ever taken the time to explain to me the difference between wholehearted consensual sex, and intimacy, and love versus rape and sexual violence and abuse. So in my little 14-year-old mind, it was all the same thing.
Oh, that's so devastating. That is so devastating. So you're thinking, I'm like worthless now. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's not like you even enjoyed it. It was like
No.
this horrible experience that you had to, oh my gosh, it's so sad. So then so it's like morning time when he did this.
Yeah.
Ugh. So what happens afterwards? Is just leave the tent or like,
I mean, at that point, like, I remember crying, but also remember being just just a lot of pain. And I honestly, like, I don't know if I just like fell asleep or if I full blown passed out. But the next thing I do remember was he had this piece of metal cable and he was wrapping it around my ankle. And then he had bolts and he wasn't twisting the bolts into place. He had like these big, like bolt cutters, and it was like he was crushing the bolts into place so that no matter what I did, they were crimped so tightly I could not, like my little bare fingers couldn't pull these big heavy metal bolts off me.
Oh my gosh. Just like the lack of humanity, and that this is truly one of the most difficult stories ever. That which is why, as like I was telling you when we were taking a little break, like you're such an inspiration. I just can't. The fact that you're here and that you're this well-rounded, amazing. I'm not trying to embarrass you. I know you're so humble too that it's like hard for you to like hear this over and over, but you're such an inspiration that you can go through this horrific experience, and you're such a light. You're amazing. And I'm so grateful for your example. Um, so after this day goes on, tell me about the next day. Are you just thinking, okay, this is just every day from here on out?
I mean, it's like that first day, like that first morning that I was kidnapped, I really did think I'd hit rock bottom. And I just, like the rest of the day, I just like remember crying and just like, just being in shock and just how could this happen to me? Why had this happened to me? Like what was going to happen next? And I remember both them acting like it was so thoughtful of them because they said like, take today to cry, take today to mourn your prior life. But, there's going to come a time when you won't be allowed to cry anymore. And you need to be grateful for this miracle that's happened in your life. Um, and I mean, that they didn't say tons more at that exact moment. Or if they did, I mean, I wasn't like able to absorb it in that moment. But I mean, like my captors, it would be wrong to think that they were unintelligent.
They knew exactly what they were doing.
They knew exactly what they were doing, but even more than that, they loved, I would say both of them loved the feeling of power and control over other people. And I mean, look at that time period as well. 9/11 had happened, like
Yeah.
the fall prior to my abduction. And I mean, I could be wrong, but my memory of that time period was that, like, there was just a lot of tension and a lot of fear around any form of extremism.
Oh yeah.
And my captors recognized that. And I think they fed off that so that if they were ever questioned over their behavior or why they dressed a certain way or why they acted a certain way, they would just turn around and say, this is part of my religion. And if there was a way to shut anyone down at that point in time, I think it was that. Because, like America was like, what? One of their founding principles, I feel like, of America is religious freedom.
Yeah.
And then you add into this, one of the principles that America's founded on, like fear, really around any kind of like religious extremism.
Right. Especially during that time.
Yeah, during that time, yeah. I mean, my captors exploit that to the most. I mean, that was the best way to get anyone to like step away from you at that time, or just to shut down, or to not ask questions, was by them being like, "Oh, it's part of our religion."
Part of our religion, which is
religion.
so this goes on day after day. The rape, the abuse, you're chained up, all these horrible things. And then I know at one point you guys went down to San Diego, right?
Mm-hmm.
And was it when you were in San Diego, I believe there was a time when, well, there was always time when we were just starving, right?
Yeah.
all the time starving. And then he would leave for a while. He'd go eat and he would like leave you and the female there. And there was one time, if you're okay talking about this, there was one time where you were so thirsty. I reread it last night because I when I first met you, I asked you about this too because I thought this is the story out of everything else that stuck with me so much from your book. Um, I remember you saying you were so thirsty, your throat was burning, you hadn't had water, and I don't know how long, but you said the hunger was nothing compared to how thirsty you got. And they were probably passed out drunk next to you. And what happens? Tell me this story.
So it was actually in Utah. I mean,
Oh, it was in
peak of
Utah.
summer, like so hot,
Just so dry.
like middle of July or August, and it's just, I mean, it's just so hot. And my captors, I don't, honestly, I don't think anyone was prepared for the amazing, incredible response that my family was able to experience in the search efforts for me. I don't think anyone had ever expected the kind of response that showed up.
Huge.
And certainly I don't think my captors expected that either. And so as that happened, that like it's funny because sometimes he'd bring back missing news like articles about the search efforts or like missing flyers of me, and he'd show it to me and be like, oh, all of Salt Lake's looking for you, but no one's ever going to find you
Did he do it in an arrogant way? Like he was proud of it?
yeah, so part of it was like kind of an ego trip for him, but on the other side I think there actually was some genuine fear there as well, because he would wait until like we were all desperate before he'd go out to get water or go out to get food. And I mean, just to get water, like he didn't have to go down into Salt Lake to get water. There was this little spring that was, so we were still on the mountainside, kind of high up, and we were far back from the city. I mean, like you would never have, like nobody found us, and probably one of the most extensive like searches ever put on for a missing child.
Well, you even
was for
heard
me.
someone yelling your name once, right?
I mean, yes, but it was still like very, very far away. Like it wasn't close. But he'd found this spring. He'd found where it came up out of the ground, and I mean, it was a difficult hike down to where the spring was at, and it was a very difficult hike back up with the additional water. So he would always wait until we were like really desperate before he'd go down for water. And this one time, like it was just so hot, and like my two captors, they had taken like they had had some water. They like gave me a couple drops, like really nothing. It was like the plasticky bottom, like with some sediment in the bottom, and that was in the morning, and it was all day. And I just remember like being so thirsty, and it was so hot, and night came, and I remember just like lying inside this tent. You know, I had a captor on either side of me at this point, and it like the heat was just suffocating. And I remember thinking like, how am I even gonna fall asleep? And um I must have fallen asleep. And then I remember waking up, and it was still like it wasn't full night, it wasn't full darkness, but like it wasn't that light either. And I remember waking up, and there was this yellow cup. It was a cup that we used around the camp all the time. Like it's a real cup.
Yeah.
And it was like right above where my head was, like right, like my pillow, like my head was on the pillow, and then right like in front of the pillow was this cup, and it was just placed there. And I was like, this is so like, why is this cup here? This cup wasn't here when I fell asleep. And I remember I like reached out and grabbed it, and it was full. And I'm thinking, like, what on earth is going on? And I remember drinking the water, and it was cold. It wasn't just full. It's
like fresh water.
It was fresh, cold water. And I remember looking around, and like my captors were still there.
But they're like dead asleep.
I mean, as far as I could tell, And to me, it just felt like a miracle. I mean, like when I would sleep, when I was like held captive, I mean, like I think like I was gone. I think it was like my escape.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I was heavy sleeper. So like, could you argue that it's possible that he could have gotten up in the middle of the night, made the treacherous hike down to the spring and back?
Probably not.
I mean, you could make that argument, like it's possible. He could have, but like they weren't nice people.
Right.
Like, why would they like
And just for you,
make an effort to give me a cup of water?
that is a total.
So in my mind, like, is it possible that he could have? Yeah, it's possible he could have, but is it likely? No.
I really fully believe that was a miracle. I do. Obviously, I wasn't there, but I think that's the most beautiful thing. It's like, I feel like God was showing you, I'm still here. And
I mean,
love
that's what it felt like to me.
yeah, that's so amazing. Wow. So this goes on every single day. As far as I remember in the book, you said that you were raped several times a day, and you're being held captive by cords. And then at what point he says, let's go to San Diego to, because there's too many people looking for you in Utah.
I mean, it wasn't even so much that people were looking for me in Utah. It was that winter was coming. And
To the mountain.
like we were not equipped to. I mean, like initially he's like, yeah, we're gonna spend the whole winter here. And like he was digging into the mountainside to create like this underground kind of lean-to. And there just was no way. There just was no way we were gonna survive it. Like it wasn't like this camp was not.
What's the mountains in Utah?
I mean, it's the mountains in Utah, but like it wasn't dug out enough. It wasn't built enough. Like there was not enough food. We would not have survived. Like we just would not have survived the elements. We would have starved to death.
Yeah. So how do you guys get to San Diego? Is it a bus?
Yeah, we took a great soccer bus.
And you're wearing your religious garb that,
Yeah.
so no one would ask questions.
Yeah.
And you're down there. And I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, in the book, you it's total inspiration when you're there for a while, said, oh, I have the best idea. We should go back to Utah. And what was it that you said to him that convinced him?
So what had happened is while we were in California, he had actually tried to kidnap another young girl. He'd found another young girl. He decided he was going to kidnap her. He went to the house, tried to break in, but heard, I think it was maybe like a big brother snoring. And that scared him enough that he didn't kidnap me. I mean, like people are always like, oh, if you're snoring, like go get checked out. It might be sleep apnea. Like your heart could stop in the middle of the night. But like whoever was snoring that night, that was a blessing. That was a miracle because it saved that little girl's life.
And you don't know who that little girl was?
No, I do know. You did. I've met her. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Have you met her?
Yeah.
I gotta go look this up. That's amazing. That's so cool that she was saved and like, oh man, that's amazing. Okay, so he goes there, that doesn't work. So then is he saying I still want to
So it was still like, yes, that was still a plan. Like he was still gonna kidnap other young girls, other little girls. And like he's like, oh, well, I'll go to, we'll try New York or Boston. Or like they were saying like really big cities. And I just knew that if we went to these big cities, like I still would not be found. And so I just sat there thinking, like, if this can work for them all this time, then like this has got to work for me just once. Like I know it's wrong. Nobody needs to tell me it's wrong. I know it's wrong, but like please let it work. And so I approached him just like I know God would never speak to me. Like I'm too sinful.
you manipulate them and limit?
Like I'm not worthy to have the honor of him, speaking to me. But I just have this feeling like we should go back to Utah. Like, could you pray about it? Could you ask God if we are supposed to? And I think more than anything in that moment, I think that was him feeling like finally,
Like you've accepted.
Yeah, like I'm accepted. I mean, he already did everything he wanted to me. There wasn't him not getting what he wanted from me. He took it. Like he didn't wait for anyone to give anything. He took what he wanted. But I think he wanted me to get to a point of accepting all of the lies that he said and accepting like wholeheartedly the manipulation into my life.
That he is so inspired and powerful.
Yes, yes. And so I think in that moment, I think he felt like that was me beginning to accept him, because that's when he came back and was like, oh, you're right, we should go back to Salt Lake. And so that's actually how it was decided that we would return to Utah.
How long after you guys got, and did you take a bus back again?
No, we hitchhiked back.
Oh my gosh. Was that terrifying? I mean, you've already been through the most terrifying things, but
Like my captors, they I know this sounds bad, but sometimes I didn't honestly know what was worse, listening to them talk or being raped.
oh my God.
It was really bad. I mean, they spoke all the time, and like it was like the same thing kind of thing, like, oh, we've suffered so much in the name of God.
Oh my
And
gosh.
like you are so like you just think you're so special, and you just think you are so much better than everyone else.
They say this
I
to
mean,
you?
that's how they like justified all sorts of things they did to me, was that you need to experience this so you realize you're not any better than anyone else. Which
Sick
I don't
permission.
think I ever did think I was better than anyone else. But that was
Innocent 14-year-olds. Wow.
like that was how they justified everything. And actually, so it was actually my idea to hitchhike back, because I mean they had talked about their travels and how they had hitchhiked around the country, and then how they had to walk on foot, and how they had to do all these things, and one of Barzy in particular never liked the thought that I had an easier life than her. She always wanted to make sure that my life was every bit as difficult as what she had to go through, or at least in her mind what she had to go through. And so I and in my mind, I thought hitchhiking sounded like a really good idea, because then, it would be potentially lots of random people, that surely, like, it would be in such a confined, like, kind of intimate space that they'd notice something was wrong.
Yeah.
That they'd
recognize
call
you
the
for
police or something. So in my mind, I thought that was a really good idea.
Yeah.
But I just like I had been like I think maybe we should try hitchhiking back. Both of you have had experience so much. I've never hitchhiked in my life. I think it's important for me to like experience this. And I don't think he liked that idea initially, but Wanda Barzy was like, yes, she needs to experience that. And that was kind of like the nail in the coffin in the decision to come back and hitchhike back to Utah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so then when you get back to Utah, how soon after you like landed, let's say in Utah, did they find you? Because they found you. Explain how they found you. It was that day.
It was the day.
I didn't realize it was that day.
So it took us like 10 days.
10 days of hitchhiking.
12 days to hitchhike back to Utah. Like, it took us a long time to hitchhike back.
Yeah, because I mean, if you're driving down and you see that, you're probably like, oh, I'm not gonna let them in my car.
I mean, like, I wouldn't.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So it's literally that day. So walk me through.
Well, so we had gotten to, we'd finally gotten to Las Vegas. We were inside Burger King, like eating a hamburger. We'd been approached by police, but my captors just gave the normal answer. The police walked away, but anytime there was any kind of even remotely close interaction with law enforcement, it'd always like kick them into high gear. So as soon as the police were gone, we're like, we need to get out of here.
Yeah.
We walked like across to a gas station that had like, must have been like a pretty big stopping place for semi trucks as well. And a semi truck driver, like, I'd seen the sign that my captors held saying like Utah, like trying to hitchhike to Utah. And he had approached him and was like, oh yeah, I'm headed to Utah. Like, where are you headed initially? And my captors had said St. George. He's like, yeah, I'm going through there. But then once we had started on the way, they're like, oh, well, where? My captors had asked him, where are you headed to? And honestly, I don't remember, but it was like he had to make a stop in Ogden. No? in Orem.
Oh, wow.
Had to make a stop in Orem or south of Orem.
Somewhere within Utah.
Somewhere in Utah
county.
County.
Yeah.
It must have been, it was south of. Anyway, he was heading to this general area.
Yeah.
And my captor was like, oh, well, do you mind just taking us with you? And then we'll continue on our journey. They were saying we were going for in Utah. They were saying, like, we're headed to the East Coast or something. I mean, it wasn't. They would never say Utah because they would want to, like, draw attention that this was our final destination. Which I know I just said they had a sign that said Utah, which they did. But, like, if anyone would have asked, like, oh, well, where are you headed to in Utah? Like, oh, we're just going through. We just need to make it to the state to make it to our next stop. But so we'd made it. It was nighttime. It was dark. It was probably like 4 in the morning when we got here into Utah, and there was like kind of down the street and across the street from like where this trucker stopped, there was a park, and I want to say the park was called Camelot, or like Knights of Camelot or something. And he was just, my captor was just like looking for somewhere to hide, to like pop the little tiny like 2-man tent that we all squeezed into for like a couple hours until we could start hitchhiking again. And so we were in this little park for like a couple hours, and then he got up and we started hitchhiking again, heading towards Salt Lake. We made it to Provo. We made it to Sandy. We were able to catch a bus into Sandy, at which point he was like, okay, we're not hitchhiking anymore. We're just going to go on foot because like we need to keep our distance from people. We'd gone inside a Walmart on State Street in Salt Lake, or Salt Lake County, Sandy area. And I
can't believe you went inside. That's like the
most. Because he was like, once we get you back up into the mountains, like you are never coming. Like you are going to spend the rest of your life up there. So we need to get some like hiking shoes. We need to get a little bit warmer clothes because it was March. It was this time, like 20 years ago. And so he'd gone in there, like he was stealing some like heavier, like more solid hiking shoes. And then we were on our way out of Walmart, and we were walking up State Street, and a police car goes by and like pulls over, and initially I'm like, what is he doing? Like what? And then that was the beginning of my rescue.
Oh my gosh. And so this police officer comes up and asks you, right?
I mean, like there was a bunch of police cars that then pulled up, and there was multiple officers. I mean, honestly,
why did they later say, like, why did he pull up? Did he know it was you? Or was
someone had called? Someone saw something. Multiple people called in, actually, like in the space of like 5 minutes of each other.
Really? Like thinking it was you?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And that is what been looking at the police to come and check out the situation. They came up. They started questioning my captors. They started questioning me. And it was when they separated me from my captors and questioned me alone that I was finally able to admit who I was. And that was when I was then taken away from my captors and taken to the Sandy police station.
Have you ever asked the police officer who asked you and you finally were able to say, yes, I'm Elizabeth Smart? Have you ever asked like what was going through there? Like I would have just broken down. Like, I don't know how they even kept composure at all to help you. I would have just been like, oh my gosh.
I don't, honestly, if I saw that police officer again, maybe I shouldn't be like admitting this, but I don't even know if I'd recognize him.
Yeah, there's probably so much going on, right?
But I feel like I heard him say in an interview later or somewhere later, or maybe I'm just lying, but my memory is telling me that my captors were convincing, but that it was like he could just like see my heart like pounding, and he just knew something wasn't right.
Oh my gosh. So, okay, they take you to the police station, and if I remember correctly, you're waiting in this room after they go through kind of the whole thing. of making sure, and it was your dad that you saw first, right?
Yeah.
So take me through that moment.
I mean, I wasn't like, I didn't know that they called my dad, that my dad was in the come see me. I didn't know anything that was going on. I mean, whether they told me or not, I have no memory of them telling me anything.
Yeah.
Um, but I know the door did like just like fly open all of a sudden, and my dad was just like all of a sudden in the room, just hugging me and hugging me and hugging me and crying. And he was just saying, Elizabeth, is it really you? And maybe I'm just slow to respond. But I mean, it took me a minute because I didn't know what was happening. And then all of a sudden, like I was being like suffocated.
Yeah, well, you've just been through so much trauma too, and wow, I just can't even imagine what your mind and body and everything's going through. Have your parents, I'm sure they have, told you, like, when like, did they get a call? What was it?
I know my mom is still probably upset to this day because they called my dad and told my dad to come down. They didn't call her, they didn't invite her, they didn't tell her to come with him. They told him to come alone.
Sure.
And my dad said he thought he was going down to identify a body.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
They didn't tell him anything, so it's not until like,
And so my dad called the man who found all of our PR, Chris Thomas, and he called Chris and he's like, because he was supposed to be going to like a news conference, a press conference, and Chris was like, what's going on? Are you on your way? And he's like, no, I just got a call from the police. They told me to come down, not to stop, not to talk to anyone. He's like, I think I might be going to identify a body. Like, can you find out something? And apparently, Chris, he was friends with someone else in that police precinct. And so he called him up and he wouldn't answer, he kept calling him, kept calling him, kept calling him. And finally his friend answers and I was like, I can't say anything. I can't say anything. I'm not supposed to say anything. And then he's like, no, you have to tell me something. Like Ed is like in a panic. He's coming down, like, what's going on? And he's like, they found her. And it's like, oh my gosh, so we have to plan a funeral. Like we have to set up. He's like, no, she's alive. And so then Chris called my dad back and was like, she's waiting for you at the police station.
oh my gosh, that is like, oh, I just have chills hearing that. Like, I just can't imagine as a parent. I can't imagine as you. Like, that is such a miracle. And I'm sure you know way more about this than even I do, but everything that I've read, the chances of a child, a little girl specifically, being kidnapped and even being found 48 hours later alive.
I mean, it drops down to almost zero. Like,
It's,
if you're not found in the first 48 hours,
they're not going to find you.
like, the chances of you being found are incredibly slim.
This is such a miracle. And I know you've told this story so many times, and I've read it and watched it so many times, but every single time it's like this confirmation that you are such a miracle. Like, this is just, I can't even you just think about all the people who are praying so much every single day. I mean, everyone I've ever talked to, they're like, oh, I remember every day we had family prayer for Elizabeth Smart. Every single day was keep praying for Elizabeth Smart, and I know you've said in interviews before that you wish every child who's been taken could have that same attention and that the same amount of prayers, the same amount of help, the same amount of everything that you got. I mean, it was a media frenzy. It was crazy. What is it that's made you so strong and stable where other people who've gone through not even nearly what you've gone through crumble because it's so hard?
No. I mean, like, I look at my life and like there's a lot of blessings that I have, like a lot of things, a lot of support that I've had. I mean, for instance, most abuse, most kidnappings, most abuse that happens comes from people that you know.
Yeah.
So family members, babysitters, teachers, friends of the family, like people who should be like guardians, people who should fight for you, not hurt you.
Wow.
And so, yes, what I went through was terrible, and it was extreme. But once I was rescued, I genuinely felt safe again. And I didn't have to worry about going to bed at night. I didn't have to be scared that someone was going to climb in bed next to me and hurt me. I didn't have to be scared about going to school. I didn't have to be worried with family members hurting me or taking advantage of me. I mean, I think that those who experience abuse at the hands of people who should be protecting them, that is such a deep level of betrayal. I mean, that is like betrayal to your very core. How incredibly difficult would it be to go on and ever trust again? I mean, ever.
Yeah.
So I look at that and I think, wow, I am so lucky because my dad has never hurt me.
Yeah.
My mom has never hurt me. Like, my parents aren't perfect. I'm not perfect. I mean, we make mistakes, but like, they have never hurt me. Like, my extended family, they have never hurt me. And then I also take into account, there are like the few oddballs that have been like, you're lying, you're making it up, you're this and that. But like, that is like the very, 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 very small.
Yeah.
Small, not even 1%.
Yeah, I've never even heard anyone say that ever.
It's like,
yeah.
Everyone has always believed me. Everyone has always supported me. And then you take into account, when people share what happens to them, because it's people that they typically know, and they're probably sharing it with someone who probably knows that same person. It's hard to want to believe bad of someone that you know. It's much easier to think, are you sure though? Like, I know them. I don't think they would do that. Like, are you sure? And so having that disbelief, I mean, if you finally found the courage to share the worst moment of your life with someone and they didn't believe you, or they doubted you, or they questioned you, like, why would you go on and tell anyone else? For someone else not to believe you, or for someone else to doubt you, or for them to be like, well, I know them and I love them and I know they'd never do that. I mean,
For even less loved.
how impossible of a situation would that be?
That's terrible. Yeah.
So, I mean, I also look at that and think, I think that made a huge difference in my life.
Totally.
Like, how hard would that be?
Yeah. How do we recognize, first of all, how do we as parents do anything we can to prevent abuse of any kind, sexual or otherwise? And how do we recognize it when it already has happened?
So the first thing you need to do, and it can't just be once, I mean, it has to be like ongoing. But you need to have like trusted communication with your kids. So a few months ago, this past fall, my foundation, in tandem with the Malou Foundation, who we joined forces with just over a year ago now, we held an online parenting conference, like an online safety parenting conference. And we had a lot of experts come in. And some of the points that really stood out to me, that made a lot of sense to me, is, as parents, we tell our kids, you can tell us anything, like, we're there for you, we believe you. Tell us anything bad, like, we're your champions. But then, I mean, like, then when they, I don't know, go decide to finger paint on the wall, or decide to bring cranberry juice on the white carpet and spill it, like, and then we react and we're like, I've told you and told you, like, why would you do this? And I've told you, like, so many times, don't drink cranberry juice on the white carpet. Like, in the grand scheme of things, rather trivial things, but maybe, parenting's hard.
Yeah.
Like, and I know, like, I'm not a perfect parent, and like, tell my kids like 5,000 times, like, please, like, do this, please don't do that, like, make sure you don't do this, okay? And then they'll just turn around and go do it. So I'll be like, I just told you.
We're
Like,
kids
I just cleaned that up.
Yeah. So it's like we have this big reaction
So
to
then
these small things.
Exactly. We have these big reactions to these small things. So then kids in their mind are like, well, if she reacted like this to like me spilling a little juice on the carpet, like how is she gonna react to like this even bigger thing? Plus predators, I mean, they look for vulnerability. They look for vulnerability and they feed off it. And they say things like, you know, your parents won't love you anymore if you tell them what happens, or I'll hurt your sister, or I'll hurt your mommy and daddy, or your mommy and daddy will go to jail if you tell them what happened. Like, this is our secret. You have to keep it a secret. I mean, so then it's responsibility is being put on the victim, on the child, to stay silent. And so making sure that you are building this relationship with your child where they can tell you anything. I mean, going back to this conference, some of the things that I really appreciated that these experts, I'm not an expert, but these experts said was, you know, like have like your cone of safety or your bubble of safety that your child can enact at any time. If they come to you and they say, like, Mom, like, I need the bubble of safety right now. And that's where you don't overreact. You don't,
I love that idea.
emotionally respond to them. You listen to what they have to say, and you just hear them. You
They know
hear
that's a safe place to
they're
talk.
saying, and you don't like emotionally respond for 24 hours. And so during
I
that
love
time,
that.
you know, you listen to them, you can talk to them, you be like, you know, like, I'm not mad at you, I'm not going to scream at you, but like, you know, there will be consequences of your actions. Like, maybe they're just natural consequences of actions. Um, but then that also, so that allows them to feel like safe enough that they can tell you what's going on, but that also gives you time to process what they've told you
Smart.
and kind of get your emotions in order so that when you come back and respond, like, if there are, you know, consequences, like, I don't know, they smashed the car or something,
Right, yeah.
you can be like, okay, this is, you know, like from now on, like, you know, your allowance, you're not getting your allowance anymore. It's going towards fixing the car till it's paid off, or, you know, like whatever it is. I don't
I
know,
love that.
whatever it is.
I've never heard that concept of wait 24 hours, and I love that so much. How do we recognize both in our own children or in any child that we see when there's abuse that's going on?
So actually, one of the great free resources that my foundation offers, well, my foundation, the Maloof Foundation offers, is called is our On Watch training, and it's just iamonwatch.org. It's free. It's a series of videos that teaches you the red flags to look for. I mean, specifically in human trafficking, but I feel like many of these red flags apply across the board. So when a child's experience abuse as well, and it's a really, really great tool to use. And another great tool that I would also recommend is an app that the foundation has also developed, and it's called Raise, RAISE, because like parenting is so hard. Like kids don't come
Oh, I thought
with
it was
manuals. Like I don't know, like I get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to talk about this with my kids.
Right.
And so this app was developed by, once again, experts, not me, just experts. They're like journeys, and it covers topics. I mean, like abuse or cyberbullying or just different like safety concerns that you might have as a parent, and you don't know how to talk to your kids, or you don't feel like you are educated enough on your own to speak about it. And so it kind of takes you on a journey as a parent of helping you make sure you're educated enough to talk to your child about it, but then also gives you like conversation starters or opportunities to have these conversations with your kids.
So tell me the Raise website again.
Yeah, it's just an app. You can go
it's an app. Okay.
to Apple's or, you know, wherever you get your apps from, and you just type in Raise.
Okay.
ISE.
And then the other one is iamonwatch.org.
Watch.org. Yeah.
Okay. And lastly, tell me about this awesome program you have that I'm so excited about.
So this last one, I will take credit for.
It's so cool. I've already looked into it. It's so awesome.
So it is our smart defense training, which it is.
I love the play on words, by the way.
Right? I mean, can you imagine if my last name wasn't smart?
It's like
Like
four.
sloppy. I don't know.
Poor defense.
Yeah, 4. Yeah. So it is a self-defense class, and you do learn striking, you do learn blocking, you do learn it is a physical class. You do learn how to defend yourself, but it also incorporates a lot of like breath work. It incorporates meditation, because actually it has been astounding. I would say over 80% of the women and girls who come through our classes are already survivors.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and it can be incredibly triggering. Plus, I mean, even if you're not a survivor of, physical or sexual abuse, like our trainers, they are very highly skilled, they're very highly trained, but they will actually put pressure on you that you need to use the skills you've been taught.
You need to learn it realistically.
To get away. So, I mean, even like our smart defense director, she's incredible. Her name's Mio. She's still her reigning world champion of her weight class in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I mean, she is like, she could take me out so fast, even though I'm a head taller than her.
Wow.
But yeah, she is for real. But like, she'll like put actual pressure on my neck. Like, she asks, everything is consent based. Like, she'll ask you, and you if you say no, then she won't do it. If you say yes, like, she will put pressure. She will put her hands on your neck. She will put pressure.
You've got to learn, right?
And like, your neck is like such a random place. Like, nobody touches my neck. Like,
Yeah.
even my husband, it's not like he comes home and is like, "Hey, Elizabeth, what are you doing?"
Yeah, well, you got to be prepared for that.
Touches my neck. And so even for me, like, I've been through the training multiple times. When she puts her like pressure on my neck, I'm always like, oh, like it's a bit shocking. And so having then the moments afterwards to like go through the breath work, to have like a minute of mindfulness or meditation, it is important. And the other element that is so incredible about our smart defense is that it is trauma informed. Because we recognize that a lot of, probably honestly everyone to some degree who comes through our doors to experience this has been through some form of trauma. I mean, we're all human. We're all in this existence together. We've all experienced trauma.
Well, some more than others, but yeah.
We've all experienced.
I wouldn't compare my trauma to yours, but
No, I heard about some of yours. I'd say that's pretty heart-wrenching.
you're amazing.
We shouldn't compare it anyway.
You're right.
But like, we all have some trauma in our lives, and so like, being able to like just take the time to just like acknowledge it and like be okay with it, I mean, is important. And to not just like wrap it up in a little box and like be like, I'm never gonna look at that again. Like, that's not gonna help.
To acknowledge it, that just shows how strong you are, that you're able to like get this all out in the open, talk about, I don't want to say fix it, but just do whatever you can to still be alive and to still have this great life. I can't say enough. I know I've told you this at breakfast. I told you this when I first met you. I told you so many times, but you are truly one of my heroes. And I don't say that to people. In fact, I told you that too, but my dad always says, I don't have many heroes, but Elizabeth Smart is one of my heroes. And we just adore you and think the world of you. You're such an example. And so I really appreciate that. And thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Of course. Thank you.